Welcome back to the Sleep Factory, where we manufacture dreams that keep you awake. For those joining us for the first time, consider this your warning. We don't deal in fairy tales here. Tonight's offering comes from the sterile corridors of corporate power, where humanity learned to step outside time itself. Phase Zero technology promised the ultimate advantage, the ability to move freely while the world stood frozen around you. Perfect crimes, invisible assassinations, power beyond imagination. But when you tear holes in reality, sometimes things notice. Sometimes they've been waiting in the spaces between seconds, patient and hungry, for someone foolish enough to give them a way in. This is the story of James Lewis, a Phase Zero operative who discovered that every technology comes with a cost, and some prices are paid by the entire human race. No heroes tonight, no salvation, just the inexorable logic of consequences in a universe that doesn't care about our survival. The machines are spinning up. The nightmares are ready for distribution. Welcome to Phase Zero. James Lewis pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner, feeling the familiar burn of recognition as the device mapped his genetic signature. The steel door hissed open, revealing the sterile corridor that led to Phase Zero command. His boots echoed against polished concrete as he walked past surveillance cameras that tracked his movement with mechanical precision. "You're late," Director Voss said without looking up from his holographic display. The man's augmented eyes glowed pale blue in the dim light of the control room, neural implants flickering beneath translucent skin. "The board is getting impatient." James adjusted his tactical vest, checking the Phase Zero generator clipped to his belt. The device hummed with barely contained energy, its black surface warm against his hip. Equipment calibration took longer than expected. The new units are more sensitive. Sensitivity is the point. Voss finally turned, his expression cold as Arctic steel. "We're not stealing candy from a corner store, Lewis. This is the First National Reserve. 37 billion in bearer bonds, sitting in a vault that exists outside normal space-time. Your job is to get in, get out, and make sure nobody ever knows we were there." The Phase Zero technology had revolutionized everything. By manipulating quantum fields, it created pockets of suspended time where operators could move freely while the rest of reality remained frozen. To outside observers, Phase Zero events appeared instantaneous. Between one microsecond and the next, impossible things simply happened. Money disappeared from vaults. Politicians died of inexplicable heart attacks. Rivals vanished without a trace. James had been working Phase Zero operations for 3 years, ever since his discharge from the Special Forces. The military had trained him to kill efficiently, but Phase Zero taught him to kill invisibly. He was one of only 12 operators worldwide cleared for temporal infiltration, his body modified with quantum stabilizers to prevent cellular decay during extended pauses. "Any intelligence on the vault's defenses?" James asked, studying the building schematics on Voss's display. "Standard barriers, pressure sensors, thermal imaging, electromagnetic field detection. None of it matters once you're in Phase Zero." Voss's smile was predatory. "The beauty of temporal manipulation is that security systems can't track what they can't perceive. You'll have all the time in the world." James nodded, though something felt wrong. The last 3 operations had left him with splitting headaches and fragments of memories that didn't belong to him. Dreams of standing in empty corridors while shadows moved just beyond his peripheral vision. The company medics claimed it was normal. Temporal displacement syndrome, they called it. Neural echoes from spending too much time outside the flow of causality. But James had begun to suspect there was more to it than that. He descended to the equipment bay, where technician Sarah Kovic was running final diagnostics on his gear. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, monitoring his suit's quantum field generators and temporal anchor points. "Everything looks green," she said, though her voice carried an undertone of concern. "But James, be careful in there." "Something I should know about?" Sarah glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "I've been analyzing the data from your previous missions. There are anomalies, quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist. It's like something else is moving around in phase zero space." James felt ice form in his stomach. "What kind of something?" "I don't know. The readings are inconsistent, almost organic. Like whatever it is don't follow the same rules we do." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted his temporal regulator. "The strange thing is, the anomalies only appear when you're in deep phase zero. Long duration missions. How long is this one supposed to take?" 6 hours. Maybe 7, depending on how long it takes you to crack the vault. James swallowed hard. His longest previous mission had been 4 hours, and he'd spent the next week feeling like his brain was wrapped in cotton. 6 hours in phase zero would push his neural stability to the breaking point. "I'll be fine," he lied. The insertion point was a maintenance tunnel 3 blocks from the First National Building. James crouched in the darkness, listening to water drip from corroded pipes overhead. His phase zero generator cast an eerie blue glow against the concrete walls. He activated his comm unit. "Control, this is Operator 7. Beginning temporal displacement in 30 seconds. Copy that, 7. Remember, you have a 7-hour window before quantum decoherence becomes critical. Do not exceed mission parameters." James placed his hand on the generator's activation switch. The device began to vibrate, building energy for the quantum field manipulation that would tear him out of normal spacetime. He took a deep breath and pressed the switch. Reality shattered. The world around him didn't stop so much as crystallize. Water droplets hung motionless in the air like glass beads. A rat frozen mid-scurry seemed carved from stone, its whiskers bent at impossible angles. Even the air felt thick, almost viscous, as James moved through the temporally suspended environment. He climbed out of the tunnel into a city locked in eternal midnight. Traffic lights burned like colored stars against the darkness, their photons trapped between emission and reception. Pedestrians stood like mannequins on the sidewalks, their faces blank and serene. A few snowflakes drifted past his face, each one perfectly still, beautiful and terrifying. The First National Building rose before him like a monolith of black glass and steel. James approached the main entrance, studying the frozen security guards in their booth. One had been reaching for his coffee cup. Steam curled above the liquid in an impossible spiral. Another had been checking his phone, the screen displaying a text message timestamp of 11 hours 47 minutes 33 seconds p.m. James' chronometer read 11 hours 47 minutes 33 seconds p.m. and 0 hours 0 minutes 1 seconds microseconds. 1 microsecond into phase zero space, with 6 hours and 59 minutes remaining. He walked past the guards and through the solid steel door as if it were made of fog. Phase zero operators existed in a quantum superposition that allowed them to pass through most forms of matter, though dense materials like lead and certain alloys could still present barriers. The building's architects had never imagined someone walking through their walls from outside temporal reality. The lobby stretched before him in frozen splendor. Marble floors reflected the blue glow of his suit's quantum stabilizers, creating patterns that seemed to shift and writhe when he wasn't looking directly at them. James paused, studying the patterns more carefully. There, in the corner of his vision, a shadow that didn't match any of the frozen objects in the room. When he turned to look at it directly, it vanished. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. It's like something else is moving around in phase zero space. James activated his threat scanner, but the device showed nothing unusual. Whatever he'd seen, if he'd seen anything at all, didn't register on conventional sensors. He forced himself to focus on the mission and headed for the elevator bank. The elevator car hung suspended between floors, its occupants trapped in a moment of casual conversation. James studied their faces as he passed through the car's floor, noting the subtle expressions of people caught between words. One woman had been laughing at something, her mouth open in silent mirth. A businessman had been checking his watch, concern creasing his features. James wondered what they were thinking in that frozen instant. Did consciousness continue during phase zero events, trapped and aware, but unable to act? Or were their minds as suspended as their bodies, experiencing nothing until time resumed its flow? He'd asked the company's psychologist about it once. They'd given him meaningless answers about quantum consciousness and temporal perception theory. But James had begun to suspect that people weren't completely unaware during phase zero events. Sometimes, in the aftermath of a mission, he'd catch civilians staring at him with haunted expressions, as if they remembered something they couldn't quite grasp. The vault level was a maze of reinforced corridors and biometric checkpoints. James moved through locked doors and past frozen security cameras, his boots making no sound on the polished floors. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, creating shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. He was halfway to the main vault when he saw it clearly for the first time. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, tall and impossibly thin, its proportions wrong in ways that made James' eyes water. It wore what might have been clothing, but the fabric seemed to be cut from the darkness between stars. When it turned toward him, James caught a glimpse of features that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. The thing opened its mouth and spoke, though no sound emerged. James felt the words directly in his brain, bypassing his ears entirely. "You don't belong here." James drew his sidearm, a modified plasma pistol designed to function in phase zero space. The weapon hummed as it powered up, casting purple light down the corridor. When he looked up, the figure was gone. His comm unit crackled with static. "Control, this is 7. I've got problem. Say again, 7. You're breaking up." James adjusted his communicator, but the interference was getting worse. "I said I've got a problem. There's something down here with me. -7. Sensors show you're alone in the building. Check your neural stability index." James glanced at his suit's diagnostic display. His NSI was reading 87%, still within acceptable parameters, though lower than it should be after only 2 hours in phase zero. The company had never told him what happened when an operator's neural stability dropped below 60%. He'd heard rumors, stories of agents who'd returned from missions speaking in languages that didn't exist, or who'd forgotten their own names and identities. "NSI is nominal," he lied. Continuing to objective. The main vault stood behind 3 feet of reinforced titanium and quantum-locked steel. Its surface was inscribed with warnings in 17 languages, though James knew the real security lay in the temporal anchors built into the walls. The vault existed in a state of accelerated time, making it nearly impossible to access even from physical space. Nearly impossible. But James had the key, a quantum harmonics disruptor that could synchronize the vault's temporal field with his own. He attached the device to the door and activated it, watching as reality rippled around the edges of the vault entrance. The door swung open silently. revealing stacks of bearer bonds arranged in perfect rows. $37 billion worth of negotiable securities, each one a small piece of the global economy. James began stuffing the bonds into his temporal containment unit, a device that could phase matter in and out of normal spacetime. That's when he felt the presence behind him. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice said, closer now, almost whisper soft. "This place is ours." James spun around to find himself facing three of the creatures. They stood in the vault entrance like sentinels, their forms writhing with barely contained energy. Up close, he could see that they weren't wearing darkness. They were made of it, constructed from the spaces between moments where light couldn't reach. "What are you?" James asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "We are what remains," the center figure replied. "When your kind learned to step outside time, you opened doors that should have stayed closed. We lived in the gaps between seconds, feeding on discarded moments and forgotten dreams. But now we want more." The creature on the left moved closer, its form shifting like smoke. "We want to taste real time again, to feel the flow of causality in our veins, and you're going to help us." James raised his weapon, but the plasma bolt passed harmlessly through the creature's torso. The beings weren't entirely present in Phase Zero space. They existed in the quantum foam beneath reality, in the mathematical spaces between dimensions. "Your weapons cannot harm us," the right-hand creature said with something that might have been amusement. "But we can harm you. We can tear you apart atom by atom and scatter your consciousness across every moment that ever was or will be. What do you want?" James asked, backing toward the vault's rear wall. "Passage," all three creatures said in unison. "Your suit's quantum stabilizers can anchor us to your timeline. We can ride with you back to the moment stream, back to the world of flowing time." James felt his neural stability index dropping rapidly. The creature's presence was interfering with his suit systems, creating feedback loops that threatened to tear apart his consciousness. He had to get out of Phase Zero space, but the temporal displacement field took 30 seconds to collapse. 30 seconds he didn't have. "Choose quickly," the center creature said. "Help us return to your world, or remain here forever as our plaything." James looked at his chronometer. 4 hours and 17 minutes remaining in his Phase Zero window. His NSI was down to 71% and falling. If he stayed much longer, he'd suffer permanent neural damage, or worse. But if he let these things return with him to normal spacetime, he thought about Sarah's warnings, about the anomalous readings she detected. These creatures had been trying to break through for months, maybe years. Each Phase Zero operation had weakened the barriers between dimensions, creating cracks in reality that the beings could exploit. "No," James said quietly. "Unwise," the creatures replied, and suddenly they were moving toward him with impossible speed. James triggered his emergency beacon, sending a quantum encrypted distress signal to Phase Zero command. Then he did the only thing he could think of. He overloaded his suit's temporal stabilizers. The quantum field generators screamed as they pumped massive amounts of energy into the space around him. Reality twisted and buckled, creating a localized spacetime anomaly that pulled at the creatures like a gravitational vortex. They shrieked, a sound like tearing metal and dying stars, as the collapsing field began to drag them back into the spaces between moments. "You fool!" the center creature howled as its form began to dissolve. "You'll destroy us all." James felt his own body beginning to come apart as the temporal field collapsed. His neural implants sparked and overloaded, flooding his brain with searing pain. The last thing he saw was the vault walls rushing toward him as spacetime folded in on itself. Then everything went white. James woke up in the Phase Zero command medical bay. his body strapped to a diagnostic table and connected to more machines than he could count. Director Voss stood beside him, his augmented eyes glowing with barely contained fury. "You cost us $37 billion," Voss said without preamble. "The temporal cascade you triggered vaporized half the vault level. The bonds, the building's structural integrity, 3 city blocks worth of quantum field generators, all gone." James tried to speak, but his throat felt like sandpaper. A nurse handed him a glass of water, and he drank greedily before trying again. "The creatures. Did they?" "There were no creatures, Lewis. Your neural stability index dropped to 23% during the mission. You were hallucinating." Voss leaned closer, his face inches from James. "Severe temporal displacement psychosis. It happens to operators who spend too long in phase 0 space. Sarah detected anomalies. Technician Kovac has been transferred to a different project. Her readings were inconclusive." Voss straightened up, adjusting his suit jacket. "As for you, your phase 0 certification is permanently revoked. You're too damaged for field work." James stared at the ceiling, processing what Voss had told him. But deep in his mind, he could still hear the creatures' voices, still see their forms shifting in the darkness between moments. And he knew with absolute certainty, that they were still out there, waiting for the next operator foolish enough to venture into their domain. Over the following weeks, James tried to convince himself that Voss was right. The hallucinations had felt real, but temporal displacement psychosis could create incredibly vivid false memories. The company's medical staff showed him brain scans proving his neural pathways had been severely damaged by extended phase 0 exposure. But then the reports started coming in. Phase 0 operators around the world were experiencing similar hallucinations. Shadow figures moving in temporal space. Voices speaking directly into their minds. Several agents had suffered complete neural breakdown, babbling about creatures that lived between seconds. The Phase 0 program was quietly suspended after Agent Rodriguez in Sao Paulo overloaded his suit stabilizers during what should have been a routine surveillance mission. The resulting spacetime anomaly had collapsed 3 square blocks of downtown Sao Paulo into a quantum singularity that took 6 months to stabilize. James spent his days in a small apartment in Prague, living off his company pension and trying to forget what he'd seen in the vault. But the memories wouldn't fade. If anything, they grew stronger over time, more detailed and vivid than any hallucination should be. He started researching quantum physics and temporal mechanics, trying to understand what Phase 0 technology really did to spacetime. The mathematics were beyond him, but he began to grasp the basic principles. Every time someone entered Phase 0 space, they created tiny tears in reality's fabric. Most healed themselves quickly, but some lingered, creating pathways between dimensions. James began to suspect that the creatures he'd encountered weren't invaders from another realm, they were refugees. The original inhabitants of the quantum foam, displaced when humanity learned to manipulate time itself. They had been living in the spaces between moments since the dawn of creation, invisible and forgotten until Phase 0 technology gave them a way to interact with the material world. He tried to contact Sarah Kovac, but the company claimed she'd never worked for them. Her personnel files had been scrubbed from all databases, her research notes deleted or classified beyond his security clearance. It was as if she'd never existed at all. But James knew better. He'd seen the fear in her eyes when she'd warned him about the anomalies. She'd discovered something the company didn't want public, proof that Phase 0 technology was fundamentally dangerous, that it threatened the stability of reality itself. The nightmares started 3 months after his last mission. James would dream of standing in the vault again, facing the three creatures as they demanded passage to his world. But in the dreams, he said yes. He let them anchor themselves to his quantum stabilizers and rode them back to normal spacetime. In the dreams, the creatures began to spread like a virus through human consciousness, infecting minds and twisting reality to suit their needs. Cities became labyrinthine mazes where geometry followed no earthly rules. People forgot their names and identities, becoming hollow vessels for alien thoughts and desires. James would wake screaming, his sheets soaked with sweat and his neural implants burning with phantom pain. He started taking stronger and stronger sedatives, but the dreams always found him eventually. And sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, he could swear he heard voices calling his name from the darkness between seconds. He knew they were coming for him. The creatures from Phase Zero space, patient and hungry, waiting for the barriers between dimensions to weaken enough for them to cross over permanently. James had glimpsed their realm once and survived to tell the tale that made him valuable to them, a potential anchor points for their invasion of normal spacetime. But it also made him dangerous. He was living proof that Phase Zero technology had consequences beyond human understanding, that every temporal manipulation opened doors that should remain forever closed. James Lewis sat in his Prague apartment, watching the sun set over the city's ancient spires, and waited for the creatures to find him. He knew they would come eventually, in his dreams, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quantum foam that existed beneath the surface of reality. And when they did, he would be ready for them. Because some doors, once opened, could never be closed again, but they could be defended. And so, James Lewis learned what every Phase Zero operative eventually discovers, that some doors, once opened, can never be truly closed. Tonight's story reminds us that progress and horror often wear the same face, and that our greatest achievements can become the instruments of our destruction. The creatures wait in the spaces between moments, patient as entropy itself. James sits in his Prague apartment, knowing they will come for him eventually. Not because he's special, but because he's seen their realm and survived to remember it. In the mathematics of interdimensional predators, that makes him valuable and dangerous. If this particular brand of technological dread kept you company tonight, the like button is right there. Consider it payment for services rendered. And if you're hungry for more manufactured nightmares, that subscribe button ensures regular deliveries from our factory floor. We're always retooling our production line. So if you have ideas for stories you'd like to hear, leave a comment below. We're always looking for new nightmares to explore. Check the description for more dark offerings from our catalog. And remember, the sleep factory never closes. We're always manufacturing dreams that refuse to let you rest. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.